I apologize in advance if I mess up any details about the story I'm about to tell. This is something that my best friend told me multiple times several years ago. Now, it's one of those stories so unsettling you can't shake it even after hearing it more than once. My friend's dad was a logger, specifically a tree saw operator. For those who don't know, a tree saw is a massive machine capable of cutting down giant trees and slicing them down to specific lengths. His job meant long, grueling hours, often alone in the deep, secluded forest of the Pacific Northwest. The way this logging crew worked, he was paid based on the number of trees he cut down rather than the hours he worked, so he would often push himself to work 16 to 20-hour days to finish jobs as quickly as possible. After he and his co-worker finished their part, the rest of the crew would come in to clear the felled trees and transport them to the mill. While he spent about half of his time working alone, the other half was spent with his friend, G, another tree saw operator. They used radios to communicate, especially when they worked on the opposite ends of the same job site. A number of years ago, my friend's dad and G were assigned to a remote job site high up on a mountain. It took the company over 3 weeks just to clear a road wide enough for their trucks and their equipment to make it to the site. By the time they began work, they were positioned in an extremely desolate part of the mountain. They were already 10 days in, making good progress, when they started hearing strange chatter over their radios. At first, the voices were muffled, just faint static-laden murmurs that didn't really make sense. They tried switching channels, but no matter what they did, the chatter followed them. Anyone who's used a standard radio knows how strange that is. It should be impossible for anyone to follow you when you're switching channels properly. As they progressed farther up the mountain, the voices became more distinct. They couldn't hear full conversations, but based on what they could hear, they both agreed that the tone of the conversation fragments felt off. My friend's dad said it sounded almost casual at times, but the content was unintelligible. They also started finding strange signs that people had been there before them, random containers, footprints in the dirt, and small makeshift campsites. Like I said before, they were in a place so remote it was practically inaccessible, so these discoveries were deeply unsettling. No one should have been up there at all. It should have been impossible. One day, G came across a tent hidden just off a trail and called my friend's dad over. They decided to investigate. Inside, they found a single sleeping bag and a duffel bag filled with the most disturbing things imaginable. Multiple pairs of children's underwear, duct tape, rope, and crude sketches of children. I won't even say what. There were even photos of a fresh apple, indicating whoever owned it had been there recently. G wanted to pack up and leave immediately. My friend's dad, ever the workaholic, insisted they finish the job. They agreed to limit radio communication to emergencies only and decided to keep working. That night, they sat in the camper, unable to shake the dread that hung over them. The radio crackled to life again, and this time, they could make out snippets of a conversation between two men. They were talking about mundane things, collecting water and firewood, but the realization that these men were likely connected to the tent freaked my friend's dad out. G wasn't as fazed, but my friend's dad was losing it. The next night, my friend's dad decided to confront them. When he heard the men talking about gathering brush for a fire, he grabbed the radio and demanded to know who they were and what they were doing there. The radio went silent immediately, and the men did not respond. That silence was almost more unnerving than the chatter. G was upset that my friend's dad had announced their presence, and the two of them got into a brief argument before deciding they would escalate the situation. The next day, around midnight, G shook my friend's dad awake, whispering that someone was outside the camper. The first thing he noticed was the soft sound of footsteps crunching on the gravel outside. Heart pounding, he fumbled for his gun, only to realize it was not loaded. He had no idea where his ammunition was. G was unarmed, and the idea of calling the police was laughable given their location. They both sat frozen as they heard the camper door handle jiggle, The door creaked open, but didn't fully swing inward. Their camper was high off the ground, and there was no ladder or stool to climb up. Then came scratching, long deliberate scratches along the outside of the door. 4 agonizing minutes passed. Finally, my friend's dad nodded at G, signaling he was going to check it out. He moved quietly toward the door, gripping a flashlight in his shaking hand. Just as he reached the door, it burst open, and he was struck across the face with a knife. His pain was blinding. He fell out of the camper, hitting the ground hard. Before he could recover, a man was on top of him, pressing the knife against his neck. Another man appeared, kicking him repeatedly in the head. G, without hesitation, leapt out of the camper and tackled the man with the knife. The second man bolted into the darkness, and the one G had tackled scrambled to his feet and followed. They disappeared into the forest. G helped my dad's friend back into the truck, and they drove 2 hours to the nearest hospital. It was bad. His face was a bloody mess, and there was a cut across his eye so severe, it permanently damaged his vision. They reported the attack to the police, but nothing came of it. 2 weeks later, as the rest of the logging crew finished the job, one of their co-workers was found bound, gagged, assaulted, and murdered in a ditch. No arrests were ever made. To this day, my friend's dad struggles with PTSD. His right eye, with its disfigured pupil, constantly reminds him of that night. I'm sure he hasn't had a full night of restful sleep since. I've been terrified of the deep woods for a long time now, mostly because of my friend's dad's experience. I haven't heard from my friend or his dad in years now, so I can only hope he's doing alright. My father told me a story once. I will never forget it for a few reasons. I think it's the first story he ever told me as a child. It's also the story of how my grandfather died, but honestly, that isn't the reason. You hear stories on TV, or sometimes you overhear something in a public place. People talk about ghosts and aliens, and you think to yourself, that ain't real. They're making it up, or they're mistaken, or they're just crazy, or something like that. You just can't believe it. Until something happens. Something that brings it all together. Connects the dots in a way you didn't think of before. Maybe it happens to you. Maybe you hear the same story again and again, happening to different people. It doesn't take long for the world to become a lot bigger than you thought it was. As I said, this is a story my father told me, but I never believed it, even though he swore up and down it was true. It wasn't until I started clicking around the internet I started to believe. I started to hear other stories just like the one my father told me. It didn't take me long to believe in the rake. That's not what my father called it, of course. He has never used the internet in his life. He wouldn't know what the consensus has taken to naming it. When he chose to call it something other than it or that thing, he called it Skinwalker, after an old Cherokee tale his grandfather told him. But I will tell you the story, the exact way he told it to me. We were out hunting one night, he'd tell me. Coyotes. We'd kill them for $50 a skin. They lived on a dairy farm in Ohio. They'd kill calves sometimes. We'd do it every night, because we needed the money. Sometimes, while we were out, we'd come on a deer and kill it. Our landlord didn't mind, and it could feed our family for a few nights and save us some money. Blood everywhere, splattered on the trees, in the grass, in the creek, everywhere. At first, we figured it was a pack of coyotes. We'd seen it sometimes. They can't scavenge and start hunting deer or cattle. The worst was when they breed with feral dogs, but this wasn't like that. Say, when a pack of dogs or wolves or coyotes attack something, they do it right. They'll pick off one that's weak or sick or old or just small. They'll hunt it, draw it into a corner, some place it can't get out of, and they will run it right to the biggest one, the alpha. And that deer will never see the alpha. It might hear it, but it won't see it. It will just notice that its throat is gone, and then it will drop dead. It's quick, it's clean. That wasn't what happened here. Something had run up on a den of deer. Coyotes won't attack a den, wolves neither, because they would get too much of a fight. They were free, I think, free bodies, just torn apart. You'd see a head here, a leg there, a torso there. Predators don't do that. They don't leave behind scraps. What had done this had not done it for food. It had done it for fun. But we didn't know that. We saw a bunch of carcasses, and we think it's something we gotta take care of. I remember my dad telling me to go home. He thought it was a pack of feral dogs. But I wasn't leaving him, and I damn sure wasn't walking through 2 miles of woods alone, with nothing but a .22 and a pocket knife. He was only 13 at the time, so a .22 rifle was about the only gun he could reliably use. Dad had the shotgun, and I wasn't going anywhere without it. It took me a while to convince him, but we finally began tracking whatever did that. It wasn't hard either, we just followed the blood. Either that thing bleed a deer before it got away, or it dragged one for a mile. I don't know. I know that I'd never seen my dad that scared before that night. We started hearing noises. I've been in a lot of woods in my life. I've been all over the world, and ain't ever heard noises like I heard that night. I heard things screaming. Heard deer and fox and rabbits and raccoons and birds, just scared. Keep in mind, this is maybe 12 or 1 o'clock. Except the fox and some birds, nothing was supposed to even be awake. But they weren't just awake, they were moving. I saw flocks of birds that night fly straight into trees, just trying to get out of there. We came up on a pack of coyotes, nearly shot a couple thinking it was what we were looking for. But then we saw they were running towards us. They ran right past us, didn't even notice. Then some deer did the same. Then some rabbits, squirrels, foxes, even a couple wild hogs. These things were supposed to be eating each other, and the only thing they cared about was getting out of there. We should have put it together, that maybe whatever we were tracking, it wasn't something we were supposed to see, and it wasn't something we could kill. I don't know why we didn't just go home. I guess we were curious. I think that was my dad's nature, to go toward trouble, a fight. And knowing what I knew about what my father did during the war, my nature was to stay close to him. We finally get into an open valley. It was normally a soy field, but it wasn't in season, so it was just flat dirt. We saw the tracks then. A lot of the animals fleeing the forest had paved over the land, but where that deer blood was, nothing had taken a single step, like they were leaving it for us to find. The tracks were shallow. Whatever it was could not have weighed more than 100 pounds, but that didn't mean much. A bobcat weighing 40 pounds wet nearly tore out my damn throat once. All that means is that it is quick and hard to hit. So we follow the tracks, and it doesn't take us long to find where it is. There's this old school house that sits on top of the hill. Half of it had been ripped out by a tornado, but nobody lived there, not for a long time. We caught homeless people in there sometimes, or druggies looking for a safe place to shoot up. We figured maybe that was it. Maybe it was some sick kid riding a high, but we didn't think that for long. We get within 50 yards, and we hear this noise, a screeching kind of sound. It was sort of made up of 2 different sounds. One was a high-pitched screech, another was a low-pitched growl. It was making both at the same time. We get within 20 yards, and we hear the sound. I can remember thinking that it sounded like paper being torn apart, while someone was swinging water in a bucket back and forth. Dad looks at me, kneels down and whispers, "I gotta stay behind him, 'cause we are about to corner him. Any animal will fight when it's cornered, especially when it is a predator." But we can tell by the tracks that it is just one. He tells me it's probably a single feral dog, probably rabid. The plan is to sneak up on it while it's eating, shoot it, and then keep shooting till it don't move anymore, then slit its throat. And if it gets to Dad, it's my job to shoot it or stab it to get it off of him. So he walks up, and I am right behind him, just a tad to his side, so I can see what it is. I wish to this day I hadn't. It was leaning over a carcass, tears off its flesh, and throws what it doesn't nibble at aside. There is blood all over the brick, glistening in the moonlight. It's pale white, human looking, but not quite human. It had arms and legs like a human, but it sat like a monkey, hunched over, and its hands weren't normal. It had long fingers with claws at the end. So we see that, and my dad hesitates. He wasn't about to fire on a person, so he clears his throat to try to get it to turn around. I swear to God, all the noise just ceased. I ain't ever heard true silence before that, and not after it. But for 2 seconds, nothing. Nothing made any noise, which made it all the louder when it turned around and made this shrill cry and jumped on Dad. He got a shot off. I think he missed. If he hit the thing, it didn't mind. But it was on him, tearing parts off of him. I start shooting it with the .22, point blank, but it barely bled the thing. I got off 5 rounds, and then I started hitting it with the gun butt, but it wasn't budging. It didn't even register that I was there. It's clawing at my dad, taking off bits of his flesh. It starts on his torso, ripping off the skin, his tit, then it moves up. It tore off his throat. It tore off his nose, his eyes. It scalped him. Then it started digging in, ripped off the bottom half of his jaw, the little bones in that tube in your neck, then his ribs. I don't exactly remember what happened, but somehow, my dad's knife ends up in the thing's shoulder, and my dad ends up on my back. I'm running, and by God, I'm running faster than I'd ever run before or after. And it's following me. I end up back in the woods, opposite the ones we've been in. I'm heading towards my landlord's house, because it's half a mile away. I can hear this thing screeching and moaning. I hear these tree branches crack and get thrown around. It sounds like someone's taking an axe to every single tree I pass. It's cracking so loud and so often, but I just ain't looking back. Finally, I trip into gravel. I look up, and there is my landlord and a bunch of his buddies, drinking around a campfire. I scream and I cry and they come over. I'm telling them to call an ambulance, and he looks at me, and I will never forget what he said. "What is that on your back?" he asked me. Just as he said it, he saw. One of those god-awful flannel shirts my dad wore everywhere. It was what was left of my dad. Most of his head, his torso, but nothing after the waist. Suddenly we hear it, screeching. He grabs me. My dad gets thrown on the ground. I'm fighting him, crying, because I think we can still save him, somehow, but my dad had been gone before I ever picked him up. He had to pick me up and throw me inside before I come with him. He and his buddies were all inside, and they're locking doors and getting guns. The landlord is asking me, "What happened? What happened?" But I just don't know what to tell him. He pieced enough of it all together to understand that there was something dangerous there. All the lights in the house are on, and someone calls the cops. They will be there, but in 15 minutes. We look outside and see it walk in front of the fire they've made. Don't know what it is. One of them says it looks like an ape. Suddenly, something goes through the window. We shoot at the thing, but it ain't the thing. It's my landlord's dog. Just the body though, not his head or legs. We start pushing things in front of the doors and windows when we hear something in the garage. I remember one of his friends saying that the doors were open. We hear metal and glass just get ripped apart. We put a couch and a TV in front of the door to the garage. It banged around some more, but then it got quiet. Not silent like it was before. We could hear it move around some, and the guys were talking, making sure the guns were ready. Someone hands me a pistol. No sooner did I cock the hammer back did we hear something shatter upstairs. Then we heard it screech again, except now it was louder, and it didn't echo and fade out, because it was inside. We all rushed to the one door leading upstairs, and we got to it just as that thing did. It opened it just a bit, and 4 or 5 men just slammed into it. It got its hand through. Someone with a shotgun took care of that. Put the barrel right up to its wrist and pulled the trigger. Cut its hand off, clean. That only pissed it off though. It started pushing on that door, clawing. We were on one side, pushing as best as we could, and it was on the other, doing the same. The wood just wasn't going to hold, so someone tells us to keep our heads down. Suddenly, the top half of the door is just gone. My ears are ringing, and there are splinters everywhere. 2 or 3 of them just unloaded on the top of that door. I don't really know where it went after that. The police got there. I was still glued to that door, what was left of it. The sun was up before they got me off of it. They put me in the hospital for a while. A lot of people talked to me, but I didn't talk back. Not for a long time. When I got back home, I got a job for the landlord, working on the farm. We didn't talk much, not about the thing. But I signed up for the army when I was 19, and he sat me down to drink some scotch as a send-off. I asked him right away what the police told him. The story they went with was a wild animal, probably a wolf or maybe a bear that had migrated north. I asked him how they could say that when they had the hand. He looks at me, stunned. He tells me that hand never made it back to the station. The cop who had it in his car wrecked, drove into a tree, died on impact. The hand was never found, probably taken away by an animal. The cops, when they would acknowledge that the hand existed at all, said it was simply the paw of a bear that looked like a human hand. I never talked to the landlord again. He went missing when I was in basic, never found him. They said he owed some people some money and just ran away, but I don't think it's that simple. I never went back to those woods. I wouldn't, even if I had the whole goddamn US Army at my back. But that was a lie. When my mother died, I didn't think my father felt he had anything left, and that he might as well settle old scores. He went to those woods. He never came back. FBI was called. They did a show for everyone involved, but I knew they weren't really looking. I had to get one drunk and slip him a few 50s before he finally told me that they got a few calls about those woods every single year, about someone up and vanishing, but that was all he wanted to tell me. Before he got up and left with the rest of his team, he wrote "The Rake" onto a napkin. I didn't know what it meant until I searched for it on the internet. Honestly, I would rather not have known. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you do and you want to hear more, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment down below, as it lets the algorithm know that you like my content and it promotes it to more people. My goal for the channel is to hit 50,000 subscribers, and we're closing in fast, so thank you, and back to the stories. As a toddler and child, I was sure that I could go back in time, but it's not that I believed I could, it's that I knew I could. I had a particular way of saving a moment. It was a little different than just recording a memory, and I was very sure that if I thought of that moment in a particular way, I could go back to it. I have made several such restore points, but every time, I did not want to lose what I had lived since then, so I never used them. Now, here is the weird part. I woke up one day at 9 years old with my memory erased. Nobody ever knew why. My memory only came back when I was an adult. And here's the thing. I never knew it, but as a child, I used to have a best friend that I loved more than anything else, but she moved away a few months before I turned 9. Yeah, this happens to a lot of people sadly. My memory stopped there. Over 6 months were still missing. These months eventually came back, but here is the paranormal part. I have memories of living 3 different versions of that same period. I have memories of her still being there at 9, but dying twice, once during a school trip, then while with me in the forest, and I knew it was the second time she died. I was still remembering the first one, and all of this was clear in my mind. And the worst, I have memories of taking a decision that was hurting so much and being hugely sad. Deciding to sacrifice, to go back again, but let her move away from me so she doesn't die, because for some reason, I knew it was the last time. I could not do it again, and because I was too sad, I decided to delete my memory. What happened next? As I said, I woke up one day at 9 years old with my memory erased, not knowing why. I'm probably just a little crazy. That or my young self was able to go back in time at will. Anyway, if it's real, I was never able to do it ever again. Adding my friend's mom's Bermuda Triangle story. In the 80s, her university sailing club invited her on a yearly sailing trip from Miami to Nassau. The trip is supposed to be a very easy 2 to 3 days, and the conditions were favorable. There were 2 boats sailing together that kept in contact via radio. When they started approaching Bahamian waters one night, the 2 boats sailed into a dense fog that eventually turned into a green tint. She described the fog as having the feeling of static electricity, and almost like it was slightly self-illuminated. All electronics on the boat went out, and they could no longer communicate with the other boat. But she also stated that the water went completely flat, and the boat stopped moving like it was stuck. No more pitching, rolling, anything. The wind stopped, and there was no more noise. They tried to send emergency messages to the other boat and back to Miami. Nothing would get through. It was her first time sailing. She was just a guest on this trip. The others told her to go in the cabin while they tried to figure out what was going on. She goes to lay down in the cabin, and then notices an elderly man standing over her and watching her. She didn't believe in ghosts or anything paranormal at the time, and was honestly just too confused to register what was happening. Then the man and the fog dissipated as the electronics, radio, and wind returned. I don't think she ever told the other sailors about seeing the men, because she herself could not comprehend it. The whole incident lasted maybe 10 to 20 minutes, but they had fallen 5 to 6 hours behind the other boat and had no idea how. When they arrived in Nassau, the sailing club met up at a bar. She was still in shock and having some trouble socializing. Eventually, the bartender notices and asks her what happened, to which she replies about something strange happening on the trip over. Before she describes what it was, the bartender asks if it was the green fog, and she was shaken. He told her he had been there a long time and had a lot of sailors come in with the same story. She ended up flying back to the US as she was too scared to sail again. I need to see if I can track her down and record her story. I was out on our standard yearly weekend trip with the Boy Scouts. That year, on the last night, they had prepared something special. Some kind of a tunnel of horror thing along one of the more stable and visible paths in the woods. The idea was that some of the adults would wait at the end of it, some would stay back, and the children would all go along one by one along the path and get spooked a bit. They hung up some lights so you wouldn't get lost, and put up some scares, like there was a big spooky spider hanging from the tree. At one point, one of them was dressed up as a witch or some shit like that and would jump out of a bush. Harmless child scare stuff. I think I was about halfway through when I guess I felt something to my left, so I turned left, and way in the distance, I think about 100 meters away in the forest, stood a man made out of light. I didn't think much of it at first. I thought it was one of the adults dressed up in some weird suit to scare us, but A, I wondered why he would be so far away from the path, and B, the light looked too seamless to be some suit. So I stood there and watched as that man walked through the woods, pretty much perpendicular to the path I was on. Then he suddenly stopped, and I could 100% feel as he turned his head towards me and looked at me. I was frozen in terror. It was like a wave of cold washed over my body. And then the motherfucker started running towards me. It was fucking weird. It felt like he was going extremely fast, but he still didn't manage to cover the relatively small 100-meter distance to me before I got the feeling in my body back and started running as fast as I could along the path. There were some more of the scares set up, but I of course ignored them all and kept on running. I could still feel him follow me for a couple of moments, and then that feeling slowly started to fade away. But I kept running until the very end. I was about to tell the adults what I had seen, but I needed to catch my breath for a second, and while I did so, I tried to rationalize what I had seen. Maybe out of fear, maybe out of rational thinking. I thought, hey, it probably was just one of the adults who put a bit more effort into scaring us. So I went up to them and I was like, hey, good job. The spider and the witch weren't that scary, but the lightning man really got me. And I remember them looking really confused, and they started asking me questions about that lightning man, so I elaborated, and the look of confusion on their faces went, and they started to look really fucking concerned. One of them went to make a phone call, and we all went back to our campsite, where I noticed that at least one of the adults was always on watch throughout the night, looking over our tents. That's pretty much it. I never spoke of it to any of the other children, and I've never been back in any sort of forest since. I've told this story a couple of times in my life, but of course, most people just tell me I imagine things.